Hi, I'm Brian from Simply Brian Enterprises and welcome to my channel. In today's video, we're going to be taking a deeper look into a topic that Paul McCorder covered in his Top Tech Boy Raspberry Pi Pico class, lesson number 2. In lesson number 2, we talked a little bit about breadboards, and if you're new to breadboards, there's a little bit you want to learn about them, but also if you're experienced with breadboards like I am, there's always something new to learn. So I want to talk this week about breadboards, jumpers, and talk about resistors once again. So what I've got here is I've got a 800 point breadboard, and you might remember in a previous video when I was showing my Pi Pico layout that I was talking about the orientation of a breadboard, and I like to orient them so that the positive rail is up. Well, I was thinking about it, and I wanted to know if there was any standard, if anybody had kind of established a right and a wrong way to orient a breadboard, if there's any particular direction whatsoever. And surprisingly, the internet, you can find an argument about anything. Surprisingly, I could not find any discussion about the orientation of a breadboard. In fact, I was watching a few different channels, people that I respect in this hobbyist slash electronics world, and I've noticed that they don't even have an orientation to the breadboard. Their breadboard kind of moves around from video to video. So I just kind of started thinking, well, is there a proper orientation? And I had mentioned in my previous video that I liked to have my rows lettered from top to bottom. So here's row A all the way down to row J. Now this is a little tough to see on camera, so you might have to look at your own breadboard to kind of see where I'm going with this, but I've got the positive rail up. This is A to J. But I was bothered by the fact that the columns are then backwards, so they go from 63 down to 1. So I started to think about, is there a better way to orient the breadboard? And I realized if I draw a XY axis like so, if this is my origin 0, 0, Y is going to increment as I go up, X is going to increment as I go right. So is there a way to orient the breadboard so that it conforms to my XY matrix? And as it turns out, with this particular breadboard, if I orient this way with the negative rail up, so the blue rail is up, the red rail is down, I'm actually oriented so that A1 is in the lower left corner. So I've got A1 down here in the origin, and I've got row J, column 63, up here in the upper right. So in an XY axis, this looks correct. So I started to think, okay, is it just this breadboard or are there other breadboards? Why has no one really developed a standard for this? So whether you're aware of it or not, there's only a few manufacturers of breadboards, but you can tell the differences because of the way they interlock or don't interlock. There's really no standard for the little pegs and the little slots to interlock breadboards. So if you use different manufacturers, they won't lock together. Oftentimes they're offset by just a little bit. And so I know that I have multiple manufacturers of breadboards in my inventory. So I dug through my parts and bins boxes and looked at some projects that I'd worked on in the past to see what kind of breadboards I had and do they fall into the same pattern. Much to my surprise, every single breadboard in my inventory, regardless of manufacturer, if I orient it this way so that the negative rail is up, the positive rail is down, this is always A1 and this is always J63 or J31 if you have a 400 point breadboard, which is roughly half. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and I wanted to share that there is in fact a proper orientation when you're working on these projects to orient your breadboard this way. So it's certainly not wrong to do it this way, but if you want to follow the row and numbering, as I sometimes do, especially if I'm working on a project and I want to measure from one area to another, it's nice to have it oriented correctly. So now you know. I didn't know either, but hey, you learn something new every day, I guess. So then I want to talk a little bit about the resistors that are in the Kepler kit. So here I have, again, it's hard to see on camera, I have a 220 ohm quarter watt resistor, and I have another one here. I'm hoping I can see it a little better. Unfortunately, this camera doesn't autofocus, so I'm trying to show you something you may not be able to see it. But one of the neat things about these quarter watt resistors is that there's a very slight gap between the 4 bands over here that represent the value of the resistor and the band over here that represents um, the tolerance of the resistor. With the 1/8 watt, not only are the legs very thin and they don't fit in the breadboard well, but all 5 bands are jammed together. It's hard to tell which end to start on. So if you're going to read these by color, it's really difficult to figure out. Even professionals are complaining about that. But these quarter watt resistors, there's a lot more spacing. And so we can read, and whether you can see it on camera, I don't know, but it's red, red, black. So 220 brown, which means a multiplier of 1, so 220 ohm, with then the tolerance band here. So I thought that was something interesting to share. And if you managed to watch my Resistor Madness video, I'll link it down below if you haven't. It's actually one of my most popular videos, so I'd like you to watch it if you haven't. I used a ruler to trim the leads. I now have something much nicer than a ruler. I've got the Paul McCorder recommended calipers, and I've got these locked right at 15 millimeters. So I can come around here, and when I trim these leads, I can get a much more exact trim now. Just basically lay the resistor down like this. There's a few different ways with these calipers. You've got the top jaws, the bottom jaws, and then this kind of pin that sticks out. I like this pin better because then I can just lay the resistor right up against the edge, and then I can clip the lead right to 15 millimeters. So anyway, just thought I'd show that. If you haven't clipped your resistors, if you're thinking about it, the calipers that Paul recommends are quite handy for that. All right, so I want to show one final thing, and you'll just have to give me a second. Actually, I'm going to pause the video, and I'll be right back with you. And I'm back. So I've inserted a resistor into the breadboard, and I've opened up my package of pre-measured jumper wires that come with the Kepler kit. And these are really handy because when you place them in the breadboard, they make a nice, clean connection from one point to another. And instead of the kind of those loopy ones that stick up and kind of get everywhere, these will rest nice and flat. And they're very nice, but they do have a drawback. And I'm going to show you that with actually a different set of jumpers, similar in design, but a different set because it shows this illustration better. So I have a larger jumper kit. I'm not going to move my camera, I'll move this here. And you can see that they're actually sorted by length. So each one is an increment of 1/10 of an inch. What's not obvious, but if you measured it out, you would see it, is the spacing between the holes on a breadboard are 1/10 of an inch. So you can measure, and this is another reason why you want the numbers going the right direction, so you can actually measure from point to point and know what length of jumper you need. Well, this is really handy, but when you start to get to the longer jumpers, we start to run into a problem. So here I have the red jumper is 2 inches. The orange jumper is 3 inches. But you see what we have here is, my resistors are more than 2 inches apart, but 3 inches is too long. So if I connect with this, I kind of have to bend it like that. And now I'm not much better off than using the loopy jumpers. So what do we do if we have jumpers that are a length that's not in the kit? And certainly we don't have every single length possible in the pre-cut jumpers. So what do we do then if we want to have nice clean jumpers instead of using looping jumpers? And the answer is we make our own. So this is a multicolored wire spool kind of thing that I picked up online. It's got 6 different colors of 22 gauge solid wire. And if I want to make a jumper, what I will do is come here and clip off a piece of wire. And I'm going to use, there's no brand name on these strippers. I don't remember exactly where I bought them, but there are different styles of wire strippers, and these are the kind you want for making your own jumpers. There's the kind that have the stripper, these stripper teeth in the handle. A lot of times you'll see like the kind of home electrician's kit that comes with that type. Those are undesirable because you kind of have to maneuver those around. There's another type that I have that are self-adjusting, where they have basically spring-loaded clips at the top and they adjust to any size wire. Those are really nice for home electrical wiring, 16, 14, 12 gauge wiring. Those work really well. With 22 gauge wire, they don't work very well. So the kind that I like are these type that have the stripper teeth right in the front. And then they also have, you can see there's this little grippy end here, almost like a little pliers. That's really handy for getting components and jumpers in and out of the breadboard. So I'm going to start with I'm going to strip one end of this. Now, you may or may not have heard it, but there was actually a click when I pierced the insulation. These fit almost perfectly to the point where it pierces the insulation and then get a nice clean strip right off. So I'm going to bend this down and I'm going to place this into the point where this resistor is, and now I'm going to wire to this resistor. And I'm going to run it about 3/10 longer. And just for accuracy, I'm going to take just a pair of clippers like this. You can use these. They work just fine, but these are a little more accurate. And I'm just going to clip that. And now I'm going to strip this end. I lost my earbud. There we go. I didn't want to mess up my microphone, so there we go. Now I'll strip that end off, and I'm going to bend that down, and I'm going to place that. This is what happens when I do things on camera. See, I even got it off by one. So now I got to stretch it a little bit. It's okay to stretch it a little bit. I don't like doing that if I don't have to. If this was an actual project, I would recut this or try a little harder to not let that happen. But because I don't like having this little wire exposed here. But you can see it's still a lot cleaner than using the loopy jumpers, and it compensates for the fact that our pre-cut jumpers don't quite go the same length. So, all right, I hope that video was informative. Once again, I will link below to my resistor video where I talk about clipping resistors and storing resistors. But hopefully this gives you a good overview of breadboards, talk about orientation, and I think these things will kind of become useful as we head into class. So I will see you in my next video. I'm Brian for Simply Brian Enterprises, and thank you for watching.